Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever austerities you practice, do that, O son of Kunti, or Arjuna, as an offering to me. Sri Krishna is giving a very nice message to Arjuna in this verse. Let us not forget that in this ninth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is entitled Raja Vidya Rajangun Yog, the yoga of the royal knowledge and the royal secret. It is the top secret that the Lord is giving in this chapter of how a person can become one with God. This is what the Lord is saying here in this verse. That is why when you initially read this verse, then it will look very ordinary, saying that whatever one does, whatever one eats, whatever one offers, or whatever one gives away, or whatever austerities one practices, one should do that as an offering to God. These are the 5 main actions that one should offer to God. When one offers these things to God, then the Lord will show the consequences of this in the next chapter. This verse, however, is worth thinking about. Sri Krishna says, Yat Karoshi, meaning whatever you do. Srimad Adi Shankarji says that Yat Karoshi means whatever you do spontaneously. You should offer everything you do spontaneously to God. One who surrenders his whole existence to God, then that person himself becomes God. It is a mistake even to say that this person becomes a part of God. This is the limits of language. The person himself becomes God. This person can never be separate from God. When a river falls into the sea, then the river does not remain a river. The river becomes the sea. In the same way, a person who surrenders his whole existence to God becomes God. Until the river has not met the sea, then if you ask the Ganga where you can meet her, then the Ganga will say that you can meet her at any of the places where the Ganga is, such as Gangotri, Haridwar, Prayag, or anywhere else. Until there, the Ganga will be there. But once the Ganga meets the sea, then you ask the Ganga where you can meet her, and the Ganga will not say that you can meet her, but Ganga will tell you to meet at the sea. This is because Ganga has merged with the sea. In the same way, when a devotee offers his whole existence to God, then the devotee can never be different from God. The devotee becomes one with God. Raman Chandraji says that Yat Karoshi means whatever worldly work you may be doing for the sustenance of your body, and these should only be offered to God. Shri Krishna accepts life. Radha Krishna ji has said this very nicely, that love of God is not an escape from the harshness of life. A person who runs away from the difficulties of life can never attain God, because if one cannot face life, then how can one face God? That is why it is not just an escape from the harshness of life, but a dedication for service. It is when one wishes to be joined with something. Because you have life difficulties will come, and it is not as if difficulties will not come. Everyone has difficulties in their lives. Your lives have difficulties, Guruji's life has difficulties, and everyone's life has difficulties in their lives. That is why the Gita is not prepared to accept that the person runs away from life can attain God. The Gita says that the life you live can be changed into devotion. There is a verse of Srimad Adi Shankarji from the Shiv Manas Puja that Guruji likes very much. Atmatam girijat mati sarachara prana shiram grum pujati vish yoga tab yoga tarachan midra samasdishti sanchara padyog pramrishi vidhi stotram stotvedho yad karma karo mitata daklam shambho tava raram. God, everything I do is in adoration of you, because you are my soul, my intellect is Parvati. The 5 parts of my breath, prana, apna, vyana, udhyana, and samnya, are the 5 faces of Shiv, my body is your temple. My enjoyment of material objects in my worship of you, when I go to sleep, that I attain the divine state, because I remember you before going to sleep and waking up, and therefore the time I spent sleeping must have been in remembrance of the divine state. Wherever I step, I'm doing a pilgrimage, because you are omnipresent. You are everywhere, and I know that you reside in all the places where I step. Therefore, each step of mine brings me closer to you. Everything I say is in praise of you, because I say it for you. This is because everything I say brings people closer to you. I give your thoughts to everyone, and remembering this one thing, I make everyone's lives pure. Therefore, everything that I say is in praise of you. Whatever works I perform is in adoration of you and a worship of you. Shri Krishna is trying to say in this very same thing, in this 27th verse of the 9th chapter, that devotion is not something foreign that you bring from somewhere else outside. It is about every action you are performing. This verse from Srimad Adi Shankarji shows how one can join their routine daily life with the Supreme Soul. The soul is not different from the Supreme Soul. When you go to a temple of Shivji, you will always see Parvati Ji. Parvati Ji is the intellect, and the intellect is the wife of the soul. When you have worship of Shivji, then you need the 5 faces of Shivji. There are your breaths, who are the servants of Shivji. The body in which you reside is a temple. Guruji has never seen a bigger acceptance of life than this. This body is not just flesh and bones. The body is not just a machine. This body is nothing but a temple of God. The objects of material happiness are actually instruments to worship God. All the instruments of happiness that you have seen are those that you can use those things and keep remembering God with. In each and every instrument of happiness you see God's grace. You see God's touch. It is only because you've got God's grace that you get all these instruments of happiness. You are living in a single room, but went to a flat and you see God's grace in this. You do not go mad after material enjoyments. There is a story of Sudama in the Srimad Bhagavad, where it is said, Sudama enjoyed the material enjoyments given by God without becoming rakish about them. Objective happiness is not a bad thing. It is a nice thing. It all depends on the perspective with which one sees objective happiness. When one sleeps, then it is the biggest state of samadhi, when one faces God. The reason for this is that until the last moments, when one goes to sleep, one is thinking of God. One's mind is so calm, and it is a rule of psychology that the last thought one has while one is asleep moves in one's mind throughout the night, and it is the first thought one has when one wakes up in the morning. One goes to sleep with thoughts of God. Wherever one walks in this world are steps to take one closer to God. The reason for this is that if there is no work to be done for God, then the devotee does not leave a house. One leaves one's house only to do work for God. Therefore, one's efforts are not for oneself, but for God. Everything one says is a praise for God. The reason for this is that one is not speaking for oneself, but for God. Not only that, but a devotee can reach a certain level, a certain experience, that it is even wrong to say that the devotee is speaking, because God is speaking through the devotee. Every action that the devotee is performing is in adoration of God. It is in worship of God. All the 5 actions in this 27th verse of this chapter of the Gita can be matched with what Sri Krishna says in the 4th line of this verse. So, the first part of this verse, Yat karoshi, whatever you do. Yat ashnasi, whatever you eat. Yat juhoshi, whatever you offer. Dadasi yat, whatever you give away. Yat tapyasi, whatever austerities you practice. So for example, Yat Karoshi, whatever you do in the 27th verse of this chapter, can be matched with Tat Madbranam Kurushva. Do that, O son of Arjuna, as an offering to me. And Yad Asni, whatever you eat, can also be matched with, do that, O son of Arjuna, as an offering to me. All of these 5 actions in this verse can be matched with Tat Madhapranam Kurushva. Do that, O son of Arjuna, as an offering to me. Madhusan Saraswati ji has said it very nicely, that what God is trying to do, is trying to say in this verse, is that the devotion to Him is doing whatever you have to do in a spirit of dedication. This is God's devotion. That is why we have had devotees of many different types. A blacksmith has become a devotee, and we have also regarded a skinner as devotee. Kabir was a weaver, that he became a devotee. There was a goldsmith. He had a business of selling gold, and he became a devotee. This is because of whatever you do. Whatever you may be doing, do it in the spirit of dedication. Do it in the spirit of dedication, and it will be God's worship. Nothing separate needs to be done. There is no need to do anything different. Karoshi means actions, and actions are generally of 5 types. The 5 types of actions are bodily actions, scriptural actions, noble actions, actions to take care of business, and societal actions. These are the 5 types of actions, and God says to offer all 5 types of actions to Him. This is Yat Karoshi, whatever you do. Secondly, Shri Krishna says Yat Ashnasi, whatever you eat. This should also be offered to God. Ramachandraji defines this as whatever you set aside for the sustenance of your body. You have to do something to make your body run. Whatever you do to eat or drink should be offered to God. Out of the 5 types of actions that Guruji has stated, the first are bodily actions, which fall here in Yat Ashnasi, in whatever you eat. Then after the body, you can include whatever actions you do, to move, to run, to earn money, etc. And this is all in Yat Ashnasi, whatever you eat. If you are doing a business of a merchant, then this can fall under Yat Ashnasi, whatever you eat, because you're doing it to eat and maintain your body, and this is the bottom line. God says, if you're a devotee, offer her things to Him, then God offers His things to her. This is a simple and straightforward rule of God. God is a system, and this system is an echo point. Whatever you offer to God, then that will come back to you. This is exactly what happens at an echo point. Whatever type of sound you make, the same sound will come back to you, not just as an echo, as one echo, but many echoes. God says that whatever things of her own the devotee offers to God, then God offers a similar thing of God to the devotee. Not only that, but whatever the devotee offers is very limited, and the Supreme Soul gives it back to the devotee in innumerable larger quantities. This is the grace of God. How much can we actually give God? Yet God gives it back to us in multiple amounts. If we go further in this equation, then whatever devotee offers to himself to the feet of Supreme Soul, the Supreme Soul will say that he would offer himself to the devotee, and the Supreme Soul becomes subservient to the devotee. Devotee has offered himself to the Supreme Soul, but the Supreme Soul has become smaller than the devotee. This is what the Supreme Soul does. In one way, the Supreme Soul is already in the material world, and the Supreme Soul has given himself to the material world. Shri Krishna said in the 4th verse of the 9th chapter of the Gita that, by me all this universe is pervaded. Through my unmanifested form, all beings abide in me, but I do not abide in them. The Supreme Soul is there in the material world, but the Supreme Soul has given human beings independence to perform actions that they wish to perform. This is the grace of the Lord. The Lord has given human beings independence. God says that He has given human beings their independence to perform the actions that they wish to perform. But human beings who offer this independence to God have God offering His independence to them. This is the highest form of renunciation. This is the highest form of offering. What will we offer to God? This same independence that God gave to human beings is given back to God by devotees. God gives these devotees back their independence. So bhakti is a relationship of love. Rohana wrote, "Praise to the gods Shesh, Mahesh, Ganesh, Dinesh and Suresh," which is Indra, who are described in the Vedas as God Himself. Those whose qualities poets are great as Narad and Vyas sit down to describe and never run out of things to say. This Lord of the three worlds is made to dance by a cowgirl in return for a glass of milk. The Supreme Soul becomes subordinated to His devotees. Otherwise, did the Supreme Soul not have any milk? The Supreme Soul has unlimited supplies of milk. But when a devotee who offers his independence to God, then the Supreme Soul offers his independence to the devotee. This is the Lord's Rahaguya, royal knowledge and royal secret. If you ever wish to win over a person, then you have to think about what the person wants and what the person likes. This is the eternal royal knowledge and royal secret of the Supreme Soul. If you look at it one way, then it is very straightforward, yet human beings cannot understand it. When a devotee offers himself to the Supreme Soul, then the Supreme Soul offers himself to the devotee. That is why in this verse, Sri Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that Arjuna should offer his independence to the Supreme Soul. In order to debate a person, may ask the question, if we should really offer everything we do to God, then whether we can be freed from this. The Supreme Soul would rely that if someone offers something to the Supreme Soul, then the Supreme Soul will offer things in eternal quantities to the devotee. But when the Supreme Soul asks that it is fine if they offer such karma, but what if they offer wrong deeds? For example, if someone says they have committed a burglary or they've done some other wrong deeds in society, then can they really offer this to God? The Supreme Soul says that if you offer something to Him, then He has to accept it. But you must remember that whatever you offer to the Supreme Soul will give it back to you, that thing, in eternal quantities. So a person who does this would have to go through the punishment, and there is no escape from this. If someone offers good things to the Supreme Soul, then the person will get good things in eternal quantities. And if someone offers wrong things to the Supreme Soul, then they will get bad things in eternal quantities. There is no escape from this. The solution to escape from this is very different. The third thing that Sri Krishna says is Yat Joshi, whatever you give away. In Yat Joshi, whatever you give away, all the Shastriya Kriya, the scriptural actions will come. This includes all the things you give to society, such as spreading good thoughts. We've already seen the definition of Yajna, which is sacrifice, Dev Puja, which is the worship of the gods, or Sangati Kranam, which is gathering of people for a noble cause, and donations. Whatever efforts, sweat and use of wealth you make to spread good thoughts in society, take good thoughts to people, and everything else you do for that good cause is sacrifice, and whatever you give away. Therefore you have to assemble the means, use the means, and all of these are Shastriya Kriya, which is the scriptural actions. God says that you should offer these to Him. Sri Krishna has 5 orders in this verse, and this is the third. In this word, Yat is used 5 times. You can count it. Yat Kroshi, Yat Yashnasi, Yat Johoshi, Dadasiyat, and Yat Tapasyasi. So 5 Yats. What Sri Krishna is trying to say is that whatever you are doing can be offered to Him. There is nothing new to be done. And once you offer yourself to the Supreme Soul, then all your objects, circumstances, actions, and everything you have will be offered to the Supreme Soul. Until you have not offered yourself to the Supreme Soul, then there may be, you may bring a lot of objects and offer them to the Supreme Soul, but the Supreme Soul would not have any value for these until you have not offered them to yourself, to the Supreme Soul. Then until then, no matter how many actions you're offering to the Supreme Soul, they have no worth. You must offer yourself to the Supreme Soul. These objects are good for rituals. Guruji finds it strange that when a person is in his last moments, then the people in his family try to make him perform some satkarma or good deeds, because they have not done anything throughout their whole lives. They call a Brahmin to the house, and they make this person at the end of his life give a donation, even though he is almost unconscious. They have a model of a cow made of silver, and then make him give it to the Brahmin. This is a good thing, and Guruji does not mean to say that people should not do this. But Guruji does not know how much fruit he is going to be receiving. The reason for this is that the person himself has not offered himself to God, because he himself is unconscious. If you make his hands touch someone who gave the model of the silver cow to the Brahmin, then how can this person get the result? This will not work. One must offer himself to God. Fourth, Sri Krishna says, dadasiyat, meaning whatever you give away. And this includes donations you give away. Within these donations, there are three types of actions. Shastriya Kriya, which is the scriptural actions. Vyavrik Kriya, which is the business actions. And Samajik Kriya, which are the societal actions. This is because when giving donations, we have the cause can be a great help to society. There is scriptural knowledge behind donations, because donations can be of three types, as shown in the Gita. They can be the mode of goodness, they can be the mode of passion, or they can be the mode of dullness. Whatever you give away should be offered to God. The meaning of this is that what God is trying to say here is that whenever you give a donation, then you should not think that you are giving it to another person. You should think that you are giving it to the Supreme Soul. Then what will happen is that there will be no egotism in your mind at the time of giving. If you are giving something to another person, then egotism arises in your mind. But if you're giving something to God, then you know that God has already given it to you, and you are already giving a small part of that to God. Therefore, you are still a pine of God. If you have taken 1 million rupees from someone and only give 5,000 rupees back, then you get egotism from only giving this 5,000 rupees. You have given 1 million, you have been given 1 million rupees, and all you are giving back is 5,000 rupees. In the same way, the Supreme Soul has given you so much in life, and is like giving only a small part of that away. So how much egotism can you get from this? But if you are not giving something to the Supreme Soul, then he would think that you are giving something to another person, and an egotism will arise in you. Guruji writes about donations for long, and then if he writes this for a long period of time, he will take pages and pages of commentary. Guruji moves forward. We're up to the fifth point. The Supreme Soul says, Yat tapyasi, every austerity you perform. For every noble action that falls within austerities, the tap, austerities that you practice should be offered to the Supreme Soul. So what is this tap or austerities? This is tolerating bad things happening to you for a cause. The root of austerities is to tolerate unfavorable circumstances. This is purifying oneself through rituals and fasts, such as Ekadasi, because you tolerate difficulties there. If you have a habit of eating every day at 11 a.m., then you will get hungry at 11 a.m. on the day of Ekadasi. but you tolerate that difficulty. This is therefore an austerity. But this is a divine cause or a higher cause. That is why austerities are there. If people close to you are ill and you have to stay in the hospital for the whole day and you've not eaten for that whole day, then you will get punya for this. Of course, you may get satisfaction that you have performed a fast for the first time, but he would not get the punya of Ekadasi because you did not have the cause of performing the Ekadasi. You had not decided before that you wish to perform these satkarma or the good deeds. The cause must be decided first, and then whatever you do will be the austerity. If you look at it, if we suffer so many difficulties in life, when a person is in coma, then he is not surviving on liquid. He can be like this for years, but if you go on for months without food, then you get punya, or the opposite of sins. The first category of person has been on liquid for years, but does he get punya? No. This is because the mission was not there. The aim was not there. God says that in austerities, it is essential that whatever you do, you should do as an offering to God. So we understand something else from this verse. Sri Krishna uses the words tat kurushva madpanam, or do that as an offering to me. Madpanam means mat sampadam, offering of oneself. Arpan means to offer. All Vedic actions, worldly actions that one performs, as well as the doer of these actions, the enjoyer of the consequences of these actions, and that to be worshipped, should all be offered to God. The meaning of this is that you should think about God when you're about to perform actions. You should think about God while performing actions, and you should think about God after performing the actions, and that when you get the consequences of all these actions, all of these must be offered to God at the feet of the Supreme Soul, and only then will it be a total surrender. People try to misuse this by offering things that they do not need, such as burning down house. There was a merchant, and a priest kept telling him that his business was doing very well, and as it is God's grace and the grace of the god Lakshmi, the priest told him to give away some money as donation for a good cause, such as water or some of his wealth, and therefore he would develop himself. The merchant would not listen to any of this, and told the priest that he would let his business run in the way it was running. One day it so happened that the merchant had gone out of town. When he came back, he saw that everyone was running about, panicking in the town. He asked why everyone was running around. A person told him that there was a fire. The merchant asked where the fire was taking place, and the person told him that it was happening in his own house. The merchant immediately ran to his house and saw that the whole house was in flames. Tears came to his eyes. All of his life's efforts had gone to waste. Nothing was going to be saved or left after the fire. The merchant caused someone to get the priest as soon as possible. The person asked why he should not get the priest, and the merchant just told him to go and get him a priest. The person brought the priest. The priest came with religious equipment in his hands and asked the merchant what the problem was. The merchant told the priest to give him some resolve, because the merchant had now surrendered his house to Sri Krishna. What will Sri Krishna do with such a house? Will Sri Krishna make a tilak out of the ashes of the fire? Will Sri Krishna do something else? What will Sri Krishna do with this house that has been burnt down? Did the merchant have the cause at the beginning to surrender his wealth to Sri Krishna? No. You should think about God before performing actions. You should think about God while performing actions, and you should think about God after performing actions. If we comprehend the Sanskrit definition a little, then we will get a lot of bliss in understanding this verse. The word kurushva is not quite often used. Kuru is a word on its own, And therefore, there is no need to say kurushva. The word kuru is in the parasmaipadi, a verb describing something done to something else. But instead of that, here Sri Krishna has made it in a verb describing something done to you by saying kurushva. There are two types of verbs in Sanskrit. Parasmaipadi, a verb describing something done to someone else, and atmanipadi, a verb describing something done to you. Kuru would have been parasmadipadi, a verb describing something done to someone else. But kurushva is a verb describing done something to you. The reason behind this is that Sri Krishna is trying to say that, Arjun, if you offer me these 5 things, then do not think that whatever you offer me will lead to me gaining something. Whatever we perform, any actions, and offer them to God, then the thought immediately comes to our mind that God has gained something. It is behavioral for humans to think that their satkarma, or austerities, or donations, were to offer to God, and therefore God can gain something. The reason why Sri Krishna uses a verb describing something done to you is that God is trying to say something. Arjun, do not think that I will gain something because I am complete. The Supreme Soul is complete, and if the Supreme Soul gets anything, then the Supreme Soul will remain complete and will not increase anything from it. If God had 100 satkarmas and you gave God 2, then it is not as if God will now have 102 satkarmas. The reason why Sri Krishna uses a verb describing something done to you is because Sri Krishna is trying to say that, Arjun, all of this which you will offer to me will mean that you will not have anything left. When you offer me your satkarma, or your good deeds, or your austerities, or your donations, or whatever else that you offer, will remain with you, until your sense of possession will begin to reduce. For example, if Guruji performs a nice big sacrifice, he won't offer it to God. Then it is rule under the scriptures that whenever a knowledgeable Brahmin comes to perform the prayers at your house, then when the prayers finish, the Brahmin says, Vishnav Bhagwan Krishna Paramatstu, meaning that you have offered to God. Now, if you do not do this then you will think that you have performed the yagna, or sacrifice, and that it is your sacrifice. Now, if you regard all your satkarmas, your austerities or donations as yours, and the sense of possession of yours increases, then the more that your sense of possession increases, then it is like air gathering in the balloon, and it will pop in the end. If you say, my house, then more air will fill into the balloon. If you say, my wife in my house, then the balloon will fill out even more. If you say, my beautiful wife, then the balloon will keep on growing. If you then say, my son, then the balloon will keep increasing in size. Then you say, my flourishing business, and the balloon grows even more. The more that this sense of mindness increases, then the bigger that the balloon becomes. What Sri Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna here is that do that as an offering to me, so that this sense of my, mine, or my will keep reducing. When that sense of mineness keeps reducing, then that means your ego will keep reducing. The more that this sense of mineness reduces, the more that one's ego reduces. One's ego will keep reducing. The sense of mineness and the sense of me will keep reducing. The reality is that when one's feelings of me and mine dies, then one will experience one's own completeness. The objects we run after in order to hold them do not make us complete, but take us further towards incompleteness. Let us say, for example, that you have a large house. that you were making, and you complete, then the person who has a 700 square foot house should look more complete than the person who has a 500 square foot house. And a person who has a 1200 feet square house feels even more incomplete. If this was so, then a person with 3 bedrooms in the house who has 700 feet then would look more complete than a person with 2 bedrooms in his flat. Now, does this actually happen? No, because each person has his sights on something that is larger than what they currently have. When a person has 1 car, then his sights are on the person with 2 cars. But if a person has 2 cars, are they complete? No, because this person with 2 cars wishes that he has an imported car as well. Therefore, the things we gather do not give us completeness. That is why one should offer everything they have to the Supreme Soul, and have a result their sense of mindness will reduce. They can be no greater gain than this. If you look at it from the perspective of knowledge, the knowledgeable people ask the question that it is fine when the devotee officers says these things, but does God really take these things? Because you can only take things if you do not already have them. They question why God takes these things and why God extends His hand. Devotees answer this question in 2 ways. First, this is giving and taking is the mental state of a devotee and not the Supreme Soul. The creation for this is that everything that is there is within God, and there can be nothing that is outside God. It is only because your devotee is ignorant that God seems far away. For example, the birthday of a 5-year-old child comes and goes, and the child grows to his father in the morning telling his dad that it is his birthday today. The father tells his son, "Is that so, son?" Because it is the father. The father takes out 100 rupees note from his pocket and gives it to the son for his birthday. It is a small child, so that when he can do it with his 100 rupee note, it plays around, turns it around and looks at it. Until then, the father is getting ready and is putting on a shirt. When the father wears his coat to go outside, and the child comes and puts the 100 rupee note into the father's pockets. So it is the father. So this is all in relation to the story dealing with the note. So the point being is that there is no greater gain than this. So we then move on. So this is still going on, chapter 7. If you look at it from the perspective of knowledge, then the people ask the question that it is fine when the devotee offers these things, but does God really take these things? And if God took these things, then will this not show a limitation of God? Because you can only take things if you do not have them already. They question God why God takes these things and why God extends His hand. So going back to the example of the father telling his son about the 100 rupees, it plays around with it and turns around and looks at it until the father is getting ready and putting on his shirt. When the father wears his coat to go outside, then the child comes and puts the 100 rupee back into the father's pocket. Did this not make any difference to the father? No, because the father had given the 100 rupee note from his pocket to the son, and then the son put the money back into the pocket, and it made no difference to the father. Even if the child had not put the money back into the father's pocket, then it would not have made any difference to the father, because the money would stay in the house and not go anywhere else. The child is not going to go outside the house, and therefore the money is just going to stay inside the house. The money will not go anywhere else. But it made a difference to the child for a little while, because the child thought that he had got the note, and therefore the child had wanted because he put it back into the Father's pocket. It made no difference to the Father. It made a difference to the Son. In the same way that when the individual soul gives something to the Supreme Soul, then it does not make any difference to the Supreme Soul. When an individual soul says that something is hers, then does that mean that the Supreme Soul has something less? Of course not. And when she gives that being to the Supreme Soul, then the Supreme Soul does not gain anything from it. It is only our mental state in the individual soul that changes. This is from the perspective of the individual soul. This is the answer of knowledge. Regarding the answer of devotion, devotees just say that it is the natural behavior of humans that they never give anything away. Nothing releases them from their hands. So when such a human being becomes so uncommon and so special that she begins to offer everything that she has, then God also changes a little as well and says that I will take it. When a human being is ready to change herself, then God is also ready to change because the human being is developing. When God accepts something, then God is not accepting that thing for himself, but to give strength and reassurance to the devotee. That is why God accepts these things. That is why when the feeling of surrender arises in a devotee, then there is born in the complete and universal Supreme Soul a feeling of acceptance. This will get born, and why it should not get born. It is a game. Guruji always says that if you understand business, then you will understand spirituality. When there is a small child in the house, then the small child may be playing with a toy set to pretend that they're a householder. The child will have a small plate, a small cup, a small saucer. The child will gather them on the table and play the part of a householder. Then the child goes running to her father to tell her father that he is ready. The child takes a small plastic cup of tea and saucer and tells her father that the tea is here. The father knows that there is no tea in the cup. What does the father do? The father says, "Dear daughter, you have made some wonderful tea for me. Let me have some." And the father pretends to drink the tea. The father says, "There is less sugar in your tea today, dear, so can you bring me some extra sugar?" The daughter goes and brings some toy sugar. The cup of tea is made up. The saucer is made up. The box of sugar is made up. And the daughter brings the made up sugar. The father then says, "Now, dear daughter, your tea is very nice." Does the father not know that there is no tea in the cup? No matter how busy the father is, he will never tell his daughter, "Go away, I am busy." The father never does that. The father thinks that his daughter has made him so much effort to do this for him, so nothing will be lost for him in accepting it. If the daughter gets bliss out of it, then the father will do it. In the same way, when the devotee goes to the Supreme Soul with the devotee's karmas, then God drinks this made-up tea and says, "Dear daughter, you have made it very nice today." When this feeling of surrender is born in a devotee, then this feeling of acceptance is also born in the Supreme Soul. This is the Supreme Soul's divine play. This is the perspective of devotion. This is the kingdom of love. Sri Krishna therefore says, "Do that as an offering to me." In the next verse, Sri Krishna will describe what happens when one offers everything to him.